everyone, Stormy Strike here, and in this video I'm going to be talking about BreyerFest 2025, specifically my thoughts about the theme in general, and all the BreyerFest 2025 models that have been revealed so far. That includes the ticket models, the special runs, and the limited editions. I'm also going to be sharing how I would rank these models, and then lastly, my thoughts and speculation about what variations we might see happen on these models. Before I go any further, it's important to remember that I am just sharing my own personal opinions and thoughts for fun and entertainment. I am not trying to sway anyone to like or dislike particular models. You are more than welcome to have a completely different opinion from me on these models. In fact, I encourage it. If you want to share your own thoughts and opinions about the models in the comments, please feel free to. You are welcome to agree or disagree with me. If it ever sounds like I'm really nitpicking models, note that it's not because I'm criticizing the models just for the sake of criticizing them. It's honestly more just that I am talking my own thoughts through on trying to decide whether or not I want to add a particular model to my collection. It's usually better for me to find out something I don't like about it now versus later after buying it. Well, I really like and love a lot of models. I unfortunately just have limited space that is already over maximum capacity, so I just really cannot be adding models to my collection if I don't completely love them. Quickly before I get into the models, I want to talk a bit about the BreyerFest theme and just overall aesthetic that's been going on. The theme this year is Cheers to 75 Years for Breyer's 75th anniversary, which this is a huge milestone. Totally makes sense for them to celebrate it at BreyerFest as well as just throughout this year. I have really been loving the overall aesthetic of this theme so far when it comes to the graphics that have been posted on the BreyerFest blog. I know those don't always really translate into the rest of the theming of BreyerFest and BreyerFest items and such, but I just am loving all these color choices. I love the little fireworks motifs. We've also been seeing a bit of little diamond motifs going on too in their little short social media videos and things like that. So far, I think all of that is really nice and very fitting for the theme. Now let's talk about the actual models, starting off with the ticket models. We of course have to start with the celebration horse for this year, who is Tightlines, aka Fish. The model is based on the real French thoroughbred, who is a successful eventer. He is a flea-bitten gray done on the cigar mold. He comes with a blue Cheers to 75 Years BreyerFest blanket, which Breyer did say that will be packaged not on the model. So I'm glad they took note of that and are apparently not going to be risking the blanket bleeding onto the models before they even get into collectors' hands. My personal thoughts are that I actually really like him. I'm not a huge cigar collector, but I do have several on this mold. I know this model's been getting some hate online because people think he needs a lot more shading or he doesn't look like the real horse. Personally, I think he looks completely fine. He looks like what I would expect from a O.F. Breyer flea-bitten gray. And I think he does have at least a little shading, has some on his knees and his hocks, and he might have a little elsewhere, possibly, that we just don't really see well in photos. I think the main reason people have been kind of really upset and nitpicking this model though is because they were expecting something way fancier, flashier for the 75th anniversary theme. And I'll admit, I kind of was too. But it seems like Breyer really kind of picks the actual horse and their accomplishments and how they kind of fit the overall theme over what would make a good model, I think. Of course, they take the model part into consideration, but it seems like they're more focused on the real horse in that case. And this model is pretty typical of past BreyerFest celebration horses. I know we've been kind of spoiled in some recent years with having some really colorful BreyerFest celebration horses and models, but we don't get those crazy colored models on super recent molds every year. I do quite like this model, and I plan to keep him when I get him with my ticket. I also really like the inclusion of the themed blanket. I do love it when Breyer includes a little blanket or a little ribbon or just something fun like that to go along with the celebration models. I think that does help make them feel even more special. Now for the event stablemate models. As a group, they are called Break Out the Bubbles. And this year they are all named after various, I'm assuming, alcohol drinks. I'm not a drinker, so I'm honestly only familiar with the name of mimosa. These models come in special packaging, which looks to be like the little cardboard bag things that Breyer has done in the past. They have those same pretty colors and cool, like, graphic firework motif thing going on, just like the BreyerFest blog, so I'm quite liking the packaging. I think it is adorable. But on to the actual models, starting with Bellini. This is the Polo Pony version of the Stablemates Thoroughbred mold, painted up in a leopard Appaloosa with Breyer-themed blue and gold tail ribbons. I'll admit, this is my least favorite stablemate in the set, but I still really like it. It's hard not to love a loud Appaloosa pattern, and I think the modified mold is fun. Then there's Mimosa, who is a mini version of the Chris Hess Indian Pony mold, and this one is painted as a Palomino Tobiano Pinto. I really love this one. I really like the stablemate version of the Indian Pony, and I think this particular color and pattern just look really beautiful on her. She is a must-have. Then we have Kava, which is the Cantering Andalusian mold. This one is painted in a glossy dappled bay. I also love this guy. I know this is the third time that Breyer has recently done this color, but I have no complaints about it because this color is just so stunning and gloss, and we haven't had it in stablemate scale recently or anything. And I also love this stablemate mold. Lastly is Prosecco. This is the Playful Draft Stallion mold, also known as Augustus, and is painted in a black snowflake Appaloosa with even little striped hooves, and is in gloss. From what I've been seeing, this guy I think is the hobby's overall favorite of these stablemates, and I might have to agree with everyone else because I am absolutely loving this model. I wasn't head over heels for this mold when it first came out in the Stablemate Club last year. I still liked him, don't get me wrong, but I didn't really feel compelled to get the particular Augustus model. This one, however, I just think is so pretty in this glossy black. I'm loving this little snowflake Appaloosa spots on him. I feel like this just really highlights how pretty and dynamic this mold is. This is another must-have for me. So overall with this stablemate set, if you can't tell, I am really loving it, and I want all of them. Which it's been a while since I've wanted all the event stablemates from BreyerFest. In like the past recent years, I usually just want like one or two of them. It's actually been several years where I've regretted not getting all the event stablemates or trying to at least get a few of them, and then never ended up trying to get them. So I definitely want to get this set, and I really hope that Breyer is going to offer it for sale separately, like they have been doing in the past few years, instead of making it only for VIP, because I'm really not sure if I'm going to try to do a VIP ticket or not this year, whether or not I go in person. So we'll see, but one way or another, I really want to get this set. On to the special runs, and I think we should maybe briefly talk about the naming theme. I'll admit, at first, it seemed like Breyer was going to be doing a naming theme like they did last year and name all the special runs after songs, because the first two reveals were song-related names. But then we realized that that's not the case. They are all just named after things related to like an anniversary theme or celebrating Breyer's history or just like having a party, having a good time. Some of those names just so happen to be song related. The first model up is Get This Party Started. Her name shares the same name as a Korn song. I doubt that was intentional though, as the blog post on her shows that her inspiration is just party theming in general, because they talk about the JAH and now Collector Club exclusive event parties. This model is a black frame Overo Pinto with blue eyes, and interestingly, airbrushed instead of masked off mane. Her black appears to have some gray undertones, and she does have some pinking on the white markings. For my personal opinions, I'm not really a fan of the mane on this model being airbrushed like this instead of masked off like the rest of her markings, or at least not masked off where like the hair touches her body. I don't know why, I'm just not really a fan of it, but I'm all for Breyer trying these different styles and techniques, and I totally get the look they are trying to go for, as it does differentiate the mane from the body pattern and shows that it has a different implied texture to it. It's just for me personally, I'm not vibing with it. I do still like this model overall. I think she is very cute and has a very cool pattern. I like this mold as well, but I'm not a huge collector of it. I'm pretty sure I have like 3 or 4 models on it, but it's not one I'm trying to conga a bunch of models on or anything. So I think this is one that I can pretty easily pass on getting this year. The second special run-up is Let the Good Times Roll. This name also shares the title and lyrics to several songs, one of which dates back as far as the 1940s. The blog post on him talks a bit about Breyer's many changes in history and embraces changes in the future. The model is painted as a sooty buckskin leopard Appaloosa on the show-jumping warm blood mold. I believe that I heard that Leslie Kathman designed the color for this model, so I have no doubt that this pattern is realistic, as she is like an expert on real horse patterns and colors. As for my personal thoughts, I would have thought I'd be super crazy for this guy because I love this mold and I love flashy patterns, and I also like a good sooty buckskin, but for some reason he's just not fully captured me. Don't get me wrong, I still actually really like him. I just can't decide if I should actually try to get him or not. It's very possible if I saw him in person, I would love him a lot more. I think I would maybe extra love him if his coat color had been something like black, or maybe even like a lighter color like Palomino or something, and would have made him really crazy interesting for me. I don't know. I do think he is very nice. He is a tentative, maybe I'll get him, maybe I won't. Good Times and Great Friends. This is where the originally perceived naming theme starts to fall off, as this one does not directly tie into any songs, but there are at least a couple songs called Good Times, Good Friends, including one song that came to mind for me from a Land Before Time movie. So every time I think of this model set and their name, I end up getting that Land Before Time song stuck in my head. But what these models' names are actually inspired by are having good times and making great friends at BreyerFest. This is the Mare & Foal set special run for this year on the Cantering Mustang and Mustang Foal mold. They were released in the Premier Club last year, so I was anticipating for them to be the Mare & Foal special run for this BreyerFest. I think the colors on these two do look really nice. It is funny that Breyer is yet again doing this glossy red dapple bay color on a model. This is now the fourth time we are seeing this color in the past couple years. I don't blame Breyer for using it yet again because it is so pretty and probably looks great on any mold. It is interesting to note that I'm pretty sure this is the first time the Mare & Foal special run set has been glossy. All the other ones in the past 15 years or so that we've had a Mare & Foal special run have always been matte. As for more of my personal opinions on this set, I think they are really pretty, but I think they are going to be a pass for me. I haven't really fallen in love with the Mare mold, and while I think the Foal is adorable, I don't feel like a need to get him on this particular color. To the Ties That Bind Us. The name for this model is inspired by how fans gather across the globe, coming from different backgrounds, to unite collectively for one glorious weekend a year to celebrate model horses and the real horses that inspire them. And that came from the BreyerFest blog post. This model is painted in the famous vintage Wedgwood blue color and has an Appaloosa pattern of various Breyer molds. I personally like this model. I like the color of blue on him, which looks a lot lighter in the pictures of him compared to the little video that Breyer posted on their social media. He looks a lot darker there. But either way, I'm loving the color. It's very beautiful. I am surprised that Breyer is using this mold silhouette motif again on a model though, because they are already using it on 3 to 5 regular runs this year. Those being the 75th anniversary models, 3 of which have been revealed, and 2 of which are probably coming out later this year and are suspected to also use the same kind of mold pattern idea. So personally, while I do think this mold silhouette pattern is a really cool idea to see, I know it originally came from 1 or 2 hobbyists, I do kind of feel like 6 releases of this same kind of idea in 1 year just feels like a little bit of overkill. And this is coming from someone that loves to collect decorators. I do think these mold silhouette patterns are really cool, but I really like it in a way of it being very novel or gimmicky. I don't know if I can describe it properly, but basically it's something I wouldn't want to collect a bunch of. I'd want 1, maybe 2 models that have this cool pattern idea on it, but I just can't see myself collecting a whole bunch of them. Again, this is just my personal feelings on it. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that think this is really cool and want to collect all these models that have this mold silhouette patterns on them. Of these potential 6 models that have this pattern. I'll probably wait to see what the other 2 look like before I fully decide, but so far I think the Western horse is the one that I'm going to want to buy. I will also admit something that made me sway to probably not want to get this model is that in the social media video Breyer posted showing the models, which I love that Breyer did these little short videos showing little 360 views of all the models, by the way. That is so excellent. Thank you so much, Breyer. Please do them every year for BreyerFest. They are fantastic. But something you can see on this guy, which you couldn't see in the photos, is you could see the very back of him. And I'm not really loving whatever is going on at like the top of his Appaloosa markings where it kind of dips down. I'm not sure if that's maybe supposed to be the semi-rearing Mustang's head or if there's like other Breyer heads on both sides of it, I guess. I don't know. It's not super easy to tell. But I'm just not really loving the shape of how that turned out personally. Lastly, I will note that, as it was pointed out by a lot of people, and I noticed as well, this guy is very similar to a previous release on this mold, which was the 2017 Liberty. That was a limited edition model that also had a blue coat with a white mane, tail, legs, and face. That model did, however, have a faux denim-like texture on it, and these little swirly things. Personally, I never liked that model and never wanted one, but I do like this model a lot more than that one, so it doesn't bother me at all that this guy is similar to that one. Seize the Day Surprise is the name of the surprise model this year. The logo for it has a lot of colorful stars on it, and we know the quantities and price, and that's about it. There are no little hints or clues in the blog post about it. There's no mention of he or she or galloping or something, I don't know. There has been very subtle little hints that have snuck in the past, but there's nothing this time. I will talk about my guesses for the surprise, but that'll happen in my surprise speculation video that will come out later on. So yeah, I can't give too many thoughts on this other than I like the name and the logo. I think they're both very cute. On to YOLO. His name is apparently inspired by the 2022 Ponies and Palm Trees Collector Club event and how, despite there being a hurricane that threatened to make getting to the event a lot more difficult, according to the blog, the events team said YOLO and aborted a plane 2 days early to get to the event's location in Florida. They said this model celebrates the many leap of faith decisions that the Breyer events team has made over the years. The model is a dapple gray on the Vanner mold sculpted by Kathleen Moody. Personal thoughts, I gotta admit, I hate the name. I really do. If he was named You Only Live Once, I would actually be totally fine with it. Yeah, it's a little long, but I would much rather take a name that's kind of long over the name YOLO. The reason being is because I think the original saying, you only live once, and the meaning behind naming this model that is all great. Taking a chance, living your life to the fullest, all that kind of mentality that is wrapped up into the idea of you only live once. That is all great. I love that. The shortened version of it, though, is horrible to me because I have only ever heard the term YOLO being used in really stupid or really cringy contexts or contexts that make fun of it. I'm pretty sure I was in high school when the term YOLO really started taking off and making the rounds, and it was just bad. It was so bad. Anyone that said YOLO not ironically was not considered cool. So I honestly don't really like calling this model YOLO, and I think from now on I am going to call him You Only Live Once, because I like that much better, and if I bring him into my collection, I'd rather call him that than YOLO. I know I said before the names of models aren't a huge deal, but I still want to talk about my feelings on it. But let's talk about the actual model now. Despite my issues with the name, I do actually really like this model. I'd say he's one of my favorite special runs for this year. His color reminds me of the special run Wells, even though it's not the same color. Just get like similar vibes from them. This guy, unlike Wells, does appear to have a white base coat on him, or a white plastic. It wasn't mentioned on the blog post about this model having a white base coat, but it really looks like he does based on how the paint looks on the model, especially when looking at the white floofy feet. They are very white, and you can also tell by the way the markings meet the rest of the color. Just really giving the characteristics of a model that has a white base coat and not just bare plastic underneath the paint. He has some nice brown eyes, which look really nice. I am really liking him overall. I hope his dapples don't look too weird or anything in person. I think I do want to get him Something interesting I want to point out. I believe I saw someone or a few people online mention that this model's design kind of looks like a hurricane, which that would make sense based on the blog post, so maybe that was intentional. I also want to mention, even though I will bring this up again briefly later, this mold has a lot of variations that it could be, including a different mane and tail, and a different body, or legs rather. I mentioned because the possibility of this mold having different body variations means that I might be hesitant to actually buy this guy firsthand and might want to buy him secondhand instead if he does end up having a mold variation to him that I just don't like. So I'm a little torn on if I'm going to actually attempt to get this model directly from Breyer or not, even though I do really like this version that's been presented to us. Hats Off to You is the vintage special run, whose name apparently took some inspiration from the Sherman Morgan mold, and how the break in its tail in 1993 actually pioneered a new idea of interchangeable mold parts. I highly recommend reading this whole thing, by the way. Some of these BreyerFest blog posts on these models have some really cool little tidbits about Breyer history. Obviously, the name for this model was also probably inspired by his hat, because this particular model is famous for coming with a hat. And he doesn't include just one hat, but two! He has the typical style old-timer hat in black with a silver band, and also a colorful hat with a big pom-pom on top. The horse itself is painted a Gruya blanket Appaloosa with black and gold harness. He also has striped hooves and leg barring, and it's hard to tell, but his stripe and snip on his face look like they might have a 7 and 5 for 75. I think this guy is really cute. I love that Breyer included a specially made party hat. I think that is very fun and a great thing to throw in for the 75th anniversary. His name is very fitting, both in regards to the model and the theme. I like his color a lot. Despite all that, I don't think I'm going to get this guy, even though I like him quite a bit. Mainly because of two reasons. One being that, well, I like the old-timer mold. It's not like a huge favorite of mine, or rather, it's not one that I have the desire to collect a lot of models of. I think I have 2 models of it in my collection, and that's kind of all I feel like I need. Even though I know my mom really liked this mold a lot, which does make it a little difficult for me not to collect models on it just for that reason. But I'm otherwise pretty content with just having like 2 or 3 on the mold. The other reason I'm leaning towards not getting this model is because his color is similar enough to a different release that I really want, which is Guthrie. I actually don't know how you say his name. I thought it was Guthrie. I don't know if it's like Guthrie or Goofrey. Whatever, he is from the Spokes and Spurs Collector Club event, and I'd much rather put the X amount of money I'd spend on this guy towards that model if I ever managed to actually afford to get one. Honestly, if I wasn't trying to be so strict about what I add to my collection these days, this guy would be one I'd probably want to get. Second to last here is Future is Bright. The blog post for this one talks about the Breyer clubs and how they've helped make new models. It says, through participation in these various clubs, both new and established members of the model horse hobby are able to participate in its growth and keep the hobby moving forward and remind us that the future is bright. This is the Criollo mold sculpted by Morgan Kilburn with a long mane variation to the mold that we are seeing for the first time. This model has a lot of dapples, and the mane and tail appear to have a little bit of pearl to them. Funny enough, the night before this model was revealed, I was thinking about what color it might be, because it was kind of expected that this mold would be a special run, and we hadn't seen it yet. So I was thinking about what colors we might see it be based on what colors the rest of the special runs have been so far, and I realized that it was probably most likely that we would see it as a dilute of some sort, like a Palomino or maybe a Cremello or something along those lines. So that was kind of a fun last-minute guess to get right. As for my personal thoughts, I'm not totally loving this model. I think it is really nice, and I like him, but I don't think I want to get him. The mold is cool, the new mane is cool, the color is nice, but I'm just not feeling like a need to get it. On to the last special run, Life's a Journey. This model's name is inspired by Breyer's journey into being a model horse company. It is, of course, the non-horse special run for this year, done on the Collie mold number 2, painted in blue merle with a Cheers to 75 Years blue BreyerFest bandana. I absolutely love this one. It is hands down my favorite special run this year, without a doubt. I love the Breyer animals. I love this mold. even though I'm pretty sure I don't have any models on this mold. I've been wanting a model on this mold, but I don't think I've ever found one. There's a very off chance I might have gotten an old one at BreyerFest at the Clarion, but I might be thinking of a different dog model. Regardless, this mold hasn't had many releases on it. I don't think it's one you really see for sale very often. So not only is this a chance for me to get a model on this mold, but I absolutely love the color they did. It's very fun and eye-catching. And of course, to make it even better, this dog has a cute little anniversary bandana to go with it. So yes, I love this one. Based on polls so far, it seems like it is not a top choice for most people, so I'm hoping that maybe it won't be very difficult for me to get my hands on this one. Now I move on to talking about the limited edition models. First is Belisma Sapphire. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. Anyway, the real horse is a successful endurance Arabian. The model of her is done on the Kathleen Moody Arabian Mare mold, in specifically the head-up or Oasis version of this mold, and also has the original Oasis version of the tail. I think this mold is an excellent fit for the real horse, at least based on the pictures of her that were posted in the BreyerFest blog. When I look at the shape and size of the real horse's face, I feel like it looks a lot like the model. I think it really is just such a nice fit. It's also really nice to see this mold used again because the last time we saw this version of the mold was like almost 10 years ago now for BreyerFest 2016. I am loving this rich shade of chestnut on this model. I think her face marking looks really cute. I'm just kind of loving her overall, and I think I might need to get her, especially because this mold does have some nostalgia attached to it for me from the early days of YouTube when It's Just a Dream was very popular to be used in videos and such. And I do just think it's very pretty. I definitely think I want to try to get this one. Next is Helsiania Nightlife. I base that pronunciation off of a pronunciation website, and I don't know if that is correct at all. But a lot easier name to say for this guy is his nickname, Ace. Ace is a 5-year-old black Welsh Section C stallion that does many disciplines, including driving, in-hand, and dressage. His model is on the Cantering Welsh Cob mold that debuted in the Premier Club last year. He has some nice subtle dapples, and one of his eyes is actually half blue. I am really glad to see that this model is not just a solid black, because I think I and others would be rather disappointed for Breyer to be charging $75 on a solid black model of 2000 made. The color on this model looks really nice though. I like how the dapples look rather subtle, and his face appears to be a little lighter. He just looks really lovely. I also think I am liking this mold. I actually haven't really gotten to see it in person much yet, but from photos, it looks like the details of it are really nice. I think especially his feathers and tail just look fantastic in how they ended up coming out in plastic. I just think this is a really nice model. However, despite that, I'm not sure if it's one I'm going to be adding to my collection or not. While I think this mold is really nice, and I definitely want to get a model on it at some point, I'm just not sure if this is the particular model that I want to get on this mold. Game Day Surprise, aka Ellie, instead of a BreyerFest Decorator Classic, aka Freedom Series. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna always call them classics. It's so hard not to call them classics. Freedom Series is just such a clunky name. Anyway, they aren't doing a Decorator Classic this year. Instead, they are doing another portrait model as the classic LE for this year's BreyerFest. Game Day Surprise is a horse who has excelled in freestyle reining. He is a dark buckskin gelding, and his model is done on the Hollywood Dunnett mold. This model also comes with a fun accessory, which is a blue and gold neck sash. Not only is this sash Breyer logo colors, but is also based after a neck sash that was used with the real-life horse in one of his performances. I feel like it's been a while since we've seen the classic scale get used for portrait models, so it's nice to see that again. I do kind of have mixed feelings on this particular mold, though. I love the sliding stop pose, but this mold's eyes are a little wonky, and it's kind of hard for me to look past that now. I didn't even notice it on the one model that I have on this mold, but I don't know if it's just the way this guy's eyes are particularly painted in these pictures and stuff, that kind of make his eyes stand out in more of a weird way. I do think it is still a cute mold, and I'm kind of considering getting it. Unfortunately, with me having to be really nitpicky about what I add to my collection these days, that often means that if there's something about a particular mold or a paint job on a mold that bothers me too much, then it means I probably shouldn't be adding it into my collection. I do think the inclusion of the neck sash is really nice. As I kind of mentioned before, I like it when Breyer adds these little fun extra things to the models. I also think they did a nice job painting the brand on his haunches. Side note, I bet one of the other reasons why Breyer didn't do a Decorator Classic for BreyerFest this year is because of the fact they have a Decorator Classic for the Breyer anniversary as a whole, as a regular run this year. I wouldn't be surprised if that kind of took place of the Decorator Classic for BreyerFest, since it's of the same theme. Back to a traditional scale model with bow and arrow. This model is based on the real-life bow and arrow, who is a 17-year-old spotted draft horse gelding, and he is a vaulting horse for Muddy Creek Vaulters. He is an intricate chestnut Overo Pinto who has been created on the loose mane version of the Cleveland Bay mold, which this mold does appear to also be very fitting for the real-life horse, at least based on the photos that were in the blog post. I think overall this is a great portrait of the real horse, but I do have to admit there's something about this model that really bugs me, which has to do with his mane. So on this side of the mane, looks totally fine, no complaints. On this other side, the very top and very bottom part of the mane is fine, but it's this bit here in the middle that just feels so out of place. There are these two airbrush stripes for the color in his mane that just do not look good because they go completely against the flow of his mane. The rest of these parts of the mane are fine because the color is flowing in the direction of the mane, or at least close enough to it. But these two lines here are driving me a little crazy, and are actually convincing me to not get this model, which is unfortunate because otherwise I really like this model. I apparently really like the Cleveland Bay mold. Can't say I've really purposely collected or congoed the Cleveland Bay mold before, but I somehow technically have like over 10 models on this mold. So I think it's safe to say that I do like it a lot. I like his overall color, I think his pattern is so cool, but it really is just this little bit on the mane that is really bothersome to me. I'm hoping maybe not all the models are like that, but they most likely will. I don't know, if I still just like this model enough overall, maybe I'd still get him, but then do something to kind of fix those two little stripes in his mane that just bug me. But again, overall, the rest of him I think looks fantastic, and does seem to be a good portrait of the real horse. Best of BreyerFest Set Series 6. This year's Best of BreyerFest set is based on models from BreyerFest 2015, which was 10 years ago, and that is crazy to think about. I did actually go to BreyerFest in 2015, and it was actually my second ever BreyerFest, so that particular BreyerFest year is a little special to me in that regard. Let's go through each model individually here. We have Reverly. I don't know how to say that. This is a miniature version of the Volunteer model Parfait, and it is even on the same exact mold, just the stablemate version of the mold. He is an Appaloosa chestnut thing. I actually don't know what his base coat color is supposed to be. I honestly really don't like this one. I've never liked the traditional scale version of this model either, and it's not because of the mold, because I do like this mold a lot. It's just something about this color just doesn't click for me at all. I'll say right off the bat, this is my least favorite model in this set. Here is Hullabaloo, who is a Palomino Sabino that is based after the Early Bird Raffle model. Cestbon. I actually have really liked the original Early Bird Raffle model. I remember being at BreyerFest that year and really hoping I'd win him. I thought he was very pretty. And I think the stablemate model version of this model is also really pretty and cute. This stablemate even has some really nice dapples. I really like this one overall. Jubilation is a Palomino Tobiano, based after the contest prize model Truffles. I remember this is another model I had hoped to win at BreyerFest that year with my diorama contest entry, which looking back on it, my diorama contest entry was really not that great, or rather not as great as I thought it was at the time. But I always thought the original Truffle model was really cool, and so of course I am loving this stablemate version. It is incredibly cute and a really great use for the little fjord mold. This one also has some dapples and what looks like a nice pearly white color, which would make sense because the original truffles also had a pearly coat. There is even a little bit of fading of color at the bottom of the tail, a bit of striping on his hooves, and he's just a really detailed little stablemate. I really love this one, which it seems like a lot of people also really love this one from what I've seen online. Saray is a dapple gray after the Open Show Overall Champion Prize model, Creme de la Creme. I have mixed feelings about the original model on the Lady Faye's mold because of those bloodshot eyes. Those are something. Fortunately, the stablemate model does not have those same eyes, so I like it better already. This airbrush dappled gray style that Breyer has done on some models over the years is kind of hit or miss for me on how it looks. I feel like some models it looks kind of cool, like I have a little stablemate in a similar color that I really like, but sometimes it just does not look so good. This one's kind of a mixed bag for me because I actually don't mind like the top body part that much. I think the color overall there is looking okay, but I'm not loving the little awkward stripes on the legs. Those look kind of weird. I think it would have been better if it had just been like a straight little line up the leg instead of these 3 little stripes. But I quite like this mold, and I can't say I dislike this color, so if I end up getting this set, I would still be keeping this model from it. Red Letter Day is a gray, I think, pinto with green ribbons in the mane on the American Saddlebred mold, and this one is based after the Open Show Reserve Prize. Oh, apparently it's pronounced too sweet, I guess. Wow, I did not expect that. I'm not super crazy about the original model this model is based after because I'm not big on the Hackney Pony mold, but I actually really quite like this stablemate version of it. I can't say this is one of my favorite stablemate molds, but it's a pretty cute one, and I do like this kind of loud color on it, so I think I quite like this one. Now about this set overall, I think I'm going to get it this year. One of my main reasons to get it is because of the fjord, but I do like all of the others except for the little mini parfait. It's rare for me to really like every single model in these sets. In fact, sometimes I only like 1 or 2 of them, or at least like them enough to get them. So a kind of rule I've established with these sets, if there's one model I really want out of it, but it's not a model that's going to be very desirable and not sell for a huge amount secondhand out of the set, then I'll just buy one secondhand later on. But otherwise, if I really like 3 or 4 of the models, and if there's one model from the set that I really want that is going to sell for a lot secondhand, that a lot of other people also really like, then I'll just go ahead and buy the set. So this one is on my wish list for BreyerFest this year. On to the 2 online-only limited editions, starting off with Hoopla. The blog post on this model talks about the history of the jumping horse molds, dating back to the original jumping horse, but also talking about the molds Newsworthy and Bristol, and some of the portrait horses done on them. This model is painted as a Bay Tobiano Pinto, and reminder that anyone with a BreyerFest ticket can buy the online-only limited editions like this guy. You just have to purchase him online. You can't pick him up at the park in person. I am really liking this guy. I like his name. It is fitting for the theme and also really fun if you like SpongeBob memes. I really like the color on him. I can be weirdly picky about Bay Tobianos. I don't know why, but I'm just sometimes very particular about them. I don't know if it has to do with the shade or exactly how the pattern is done. This guy, however, I do really like. He is very nice, and I can't wait to see what kind of variation they hopefully put on him, which I will talk more about that later in the video. The other online-only limited edition is the stablemate model Shindig. This is another short and fun name for a model, and again, nicely relates to the theme. The blog post for this one is about how Breyer has celebrated draft horses over the years, mentioning several draft horse molds like the Clydesdale Stallion and Percheron Mare, and to even real-life draft horses that have become Breyer models over the years. The model Shindig is on the Giorgio. I am probably getting that wrong, but it is the stablemate version of the Georg model. That one I do know how to pronounce. It is Georg, not George, as a lot of people call it. This model is a shaded gray, very loud Sabino. I quite like this little guy. I am not super crazy about the Georg mold, both the traditional scale and stablemate scale models. I know a lot of people are crazy about this mold though. I just like him alright. He's not one I feel like I need to really collect much of though. I do, however, really love the color on this model. This color is so fun and flashy that I think for that reason alone I probably want to get him. This is seriously a BreyerFest year where I'm just wanting all the stablemates. Party Pal is the BreyerFest plush for this year, and it's not too surprising that they went with Pal for the 75th anniversary. What did surprise me a bit is that this limited edition item is back to being available for VIP ticket holders to select as one of their pre-purchase options, as they didn't do that with the plush last year and actually didn't even reveal it until much closer to BreyerFest. As for the actual plush, I am not very impressed with it this year. In fact, this is probably one of my least favorite plush designs that Breyer has done for BreyerFest. I don't think I would consider this quite as bad as the Denim and Diamonds plush from 2013, but I still have issues with it. I think what also made seeing this plush for the first time worse for me is the fact that before they revealed it, they actually showed on the blog post the Pal's Palette plush from 2021, which was very cute and a very nice plush. But then they showed this one. I think the face on this plush is just not very good. It's just got a goofy look to me, and not in a cute way. I feel like it just kind of sticks out like a sore thumb compared to a lot of the other designs of the BreyerFest plush. I'm really hoping this isn't going to be like a new design style they go with for a future BreyerFest plush, because I might have to stop collecting them if it is. I think if this plush had fluffy fabric instead of the minky fabric, it would be a lot better for me. But instead they use the minky fabric, which I'm honestly not a fan of in general. But I usually don't mind it as much if the rest of the plush has a really cute design. But I feel like in this case, it just draws attention to how off the face looks. If the face was done just a little bit different, I think it could have been pretty cute. I feel like maybe the shape of the face was just tweaked a bit. It wouldn't look quite so, like, puffy. I don't want to say just bad things about this plush, though. I do want to say that I think the party hat is very fun and cute, and I think the idea of it having a blue or yellow pom-pom is also kind of fun. Personally, I think the yellow pom-pom is my favorite of the two. Despite how much I kind of don't like this plush, I am probably going to still get it because I do technically have a plush for every year I've attended BreyerFest, except technically 2011 because they didn't have a plush then. So I would like to continue that collection of plush if possible. I'm sorry I'm being so mean to this plush. I am just very particular about my stuffed animals, as stuffed animals are one of the other main things I collect besides model horses. Standing Ovation is the last BreyerFest 2025 limited edition model, and this is the crystal model done as Kathleen Moody's American Saddlebred Stallion sculpture. This is a mold that I would consider to be pretty iconic for Breyer, so it is rather fitting that it is the crystal model for this year. Overall, I think it's pretty cool. I actually usually think the crystal models are pretty neat. I, however, do not allow myself to collect them because I am terrified about breaking them. There are a few Breyer molds I might make an exception for if they ever became crystal models, but otherwise, I like to view and appreciate these crystal models from a distance and not add them to my collection. Now that I've talked about each model in depth, I want to share where I would rank them all in terms of how much I like them. I laid out my tiers as love, like a lot, like, and it's alright. I was originally also going to include in these tier titles how likely I was to buy them, but I have some outliers in how much I like a model versus whether or not I'm going to actually get it, so I decided to instead just do this ranking based on how much I like them. Generally, the more I like a model, the more likely I am to get it, but not always, particularly in the case where they already come in a set with like the stablemates, or in the case of the plush, it being a series of sort that I collect, so I kind of want to get it no matter what. But yeah, there you can see my rankings of the models. This is a tier list that anyone can use, by the way. You can even change what each tier title says, so you can better fit it to how you would personally rank these models. If you post a screenshot of your rankings to social media, feel free to tag me in them if you'd like. I do think it is fun to see how people's rankings vary. And of course, the link to that will be in the description down below, and if I remember, I will put it in the pinned comment as well. Now for the last segment in this video, talking about possible variations. I will first go over the limited edition models, and then I will get into talking about the special runs, which have a lot more to talk about. I am mostly going to be talking about the online-only limited edition models here, as I do not expect there to be any variations on the rest of the limited edition models. Because of how those models are packaged and displayed at BreyerFest, we usually don't see variations for them. There is the possibility that Breyer might do pre-orders for glossy versions of the portrait models like they did in 2020 and 2021. They haven't done that since, but because it is a special anniversary year, maybe they would do that. I'm not really expecting it, but it's not impossible. In both 2023 and 2024, the online-only stablemate had a smaller run variation mixed in. 2023 was a realistic color and 2024 was a decorator. I think we will see a variation happen again with this model, and I think it could go either way on if he'd receive a realistic or deco variation. Since this model is matte instead of glossy like the other two, I also think we could very well see him just have a glossy variation thrown in. He probably would look fantastic in gloss. Next we have Hoopla to talk about. So the online-only traditional had a variation in 2022 and 2023, but not last year in 2024. However, it is important to note that 2024 was a portrait model, and I was actually not expecting them to do a variation on that model. Hoopla is not based on a specific real horse, so I think it is very possible that we'll see some sort of variation on him. Like the stablemate, I think some of the variations we could see include a glossy version, or a change of color to a different realistic color, or a fun decorator color. Since this model has a different braided mane and tail variation, that is yet another possible option that we could see. Personally, I hope we see a different color variation on him, as I think he would just look really cool in another realistic color, or a fun flashy deco color. This pinto pattern, I think, on him would just make so many different colors look really nice, so I hope they take advantage of that. Both of these online models, I think, have a lot of great possibilities for variation, so I really hope Breyer does something fun with them, and I can't wait to see whatever it is they do if they end up putting variations on them. Now for the special runs. And important to note that I am not talking about or including the surprise model in these talks. The surprise model will surely have many different variations, but I will talk more about my ideas on those in the surprise model speculation video. This discussion is just for all the other special runs and the possible variations they could have. I'm going to first go over some brief variation history. In recent years, we usually see 3 different kinds of 50-50 split variations on models. Last year was different as they didn't do any 50-50 splits, but they still technically kind of stuck with those 3 different types of variations. Those variations are a hair split, a matte and glossy split, and a color split. If my memory and research is correct, the matte and glossy split is the variation that has been around the longest and most consistently, so I feel like that is almost a guarantee that we will see that at every year of BreyerFest. Of course, Breyer can always change things. The color split was something that was introduced in, I believe, 2018, so I think that one is probably considered the most recent one, and the hair split came around somewhere in between there. So those are the 3 types of variations that we've been usually seeing every year lately, but remember that there's always the possibility that Breyer doesn't do them all, or they change things up somehow. I do also think that we might see some, most, or maybe even all the special runs get some kind of lower run or micro run variation, kind of like they did in 2014, 2019, and 2021 and 2023. But I'm going to talk about those after I go over these more commonly seen variation splits for the special runs. I'm going to first go over the hair split. There are a few models that we could see have a mane and tail, aka hair split, just by knowing that their molds have had hair variations in the past. Models that could have a hair variation are Let the Good Times Roll, You Only Live Once, and The Future is Bright. The Vanner mold could even have a whole leg swap as well as a hair swap, or maybe even no hair swap and just leg swap. It's hard for me to say which of these I think is most likely to have a hair split, partly because I personally don't want to see any of these models have a hair split, I prefer the loose mane version of the show jumper, and I prefer this version of the hair and legs for the Vanner or Brishan mold. And I think I also like this long mane on this color of the Criollo mold. I do think this mold is probably the one that is least likely to have a mane change, just because this is our first time seeing this new mane. It kind of seems like when Breyer introduces a new mane and tail variation on a mold, they like to really highlight that and stand that out. I could be wrong, but I just feel like any other special runs where they've done something similar with, they don't like to give it the old hairstyle. If anything, they'll throw in a variation of a new hairstyle that we haven't seen before. If that makes any sense. I think the Vanner and the show jumper have a pretty even chance as getting a hair split, and maybe they will even both get a hair split. So I'm going to not pick one and say that I think they are both going to get it. On to the color split. Thus far, models that have been color splits, at least I'm pretty sure from what I've researched and remember, they have always been models with white patterns, aka Appaloosa or Pinto patterns. While Breyer very well could break that pattern and do it on a solid colored model, I feel like without a drastic white pattern to kind of ground that specific model, it feels like it becomes too much like a totally different release. For example, if you look at the Palomino guy here and you made him a bay, well, that just kind of feels like a totally different model. There's not really much that makes it feel like it's the same model but in a little bit different color. It just feels like a completely different color on a completely different model. Which is why I don't think Breyer is generally going to do a color split on a model that isn't a Pinto or Appaloosa. I do want to throw in a fun wildcard idea, though, of if they did do a solid colored model as a color split, the only model in this lineup I think they could actually do something cool and pull it off would be You Only Live Once. The reason why is because this guy does have a decent amount of white on him, and because the hurricane was mentioned as an inspiration behind his name and maybe even his color, who knows, they very well could have just threw the name on after the model was already conceptualized. But if this model was to have a hurricane theme, it could be pretty fitting if it had a color split and was made to be like a much darker gray, like a nearly black, dark dappled gray, or in the opposite direction, it could be a little bit lighter gray, so it kind of looked more like a fluffy cloud instead of a dark cloud. I think either way, that could be a really cool idea. In general, I don't think they would do that, but I do think it is a fun idea, so I just had to mention it. But now let me get into the models that I think are actually most likely to get a color split. So if we rule out all the solid colored special runs, that leaves Get This Party Started, Let the Good Times Roll, To the Ties That Bind Us, Hats Off to You, and Life's a Journey. Life's a Journey is one I really don't think would be the color split either, just because they don't usually do those kinds of splits on the non-horse models. This model's color could technically work well for a color change though, because of its pattern. It's slightly possible, but not likely, so I'm going to take that one off the list. The Decorator model is another they usually don't do any kind of crazy split for. That is except in the years where they have crazy color variations for almost all the special runs. But again, I'll talk more about that later. For this guy, I can't help but think though how cool and crazy it would be if they did a color split of gold to go with the Wedgwood. So it's even more of a callback to their old vintage decorators. But as I said, like with the dog, I don't think it's very likely that they'll do a color split on this one. I think that variation could still happen, but I think that's much more likely to have like a smaller run on it instead of more of an even split. So I'm not really counting him quite in this exact discussion that I'm going for. Onto the Vintage Special Run, which is a model that we have seen receive a split of some kind several times in the past. For example, we've seen the model Thorn get a matte and glossy split. We've also seen the one get a color split. So this mold is definitely possible to get some kind of split for it, and I think a color split is possible. I do want to note though that the Vintage Special Run last year did kind of receive a color split, sort of. It was a very subtle color split because they just changed the color of her brindle markings, but I think that still technically counts. So because of that reason, plus the fact that this model comes with two different hats, which I think on its own already makes this special run rather, well, special, I kind of feel like with those two factors at play, that it might make it less possible to be the color split model this year. With those models probably out, that leaves Get This Party Started and Let the Good Times Roll. Personal bias here, but I would love to see Good Times Roll get a color split because, as I mentioned earlier, I think his pattern is super cool, but I'm just not totally vibing with the coat color for some reason. So I think seeing him in a different color, whether that's lighter or darker than the color currently, I think would just look absolutely incredible and make me need whatever color variation he came in. My personal bias aside though, I think that the pony here is actually the most likely to receive the color split, partly because someone pointed out that in one of Breyer's past broadcasts at the archive room, there was a model with the same pinto pattern as this one, but in chestnut. Now that absolutely does not mean this guarantees her to be the color split in any way. As we've seen from those broadcasts and even just the test release that Breyer has sold and posted about over the years, Breyer may test out many different colors on a model, and that does not mean that they will ever get a wide release. They very well could have had this model made before and then said, hey, what if we made it black? And then we're like, great, that's our special run now, and we're gonna give it a glossy split. Like, we don't know. We don't know what they're gonna do. But even disregarding that chestnut variation existing, I think she is the one most likely to get the color split. She would look great in chestnut or another color. Her pattern is very loud and fitting for it. And I'd have Let the Good Times Roll as my runner-up guess. Lastly, let's talk about the matte and glossy split. Prior to 2024, the matte glossy split has always been done on a special run that is advertised as matte. Last year, they surprised us by giving the glossy model a matte variation. Now, from what I've heard, a lot of people were really not happy about that. Most people wanted the glossy variation and were disappointed when they got the matte variation, despite it being more rare than the glossy. And even despite that rarity, the matte does not even sell for higher than the glossy one. This is honestly a little surprising to me because I think both versions are really pretty. I kind of like the matte one just as well as the glossy, but I'm also biased in that I like matte usually just as well as glossy a lot of the times on models. So now there's the big question of if Breyer is aware that the glossy to matte variation last year did not go over well, because I think if they did hear about it, then they might reconsider giving a presented glossy model a matte variation again. But fortunately, they have had time to hear about the reception to this, so if they did, and they wanted to change the version of the model they were originally considering as advertising, then they could probably pretty easily just swap out the glossy one for the matte one if they were planning to once again do a glossy to matte split. So with that in mind, I am willing to lean into the idea that they might go for a matte model being the glossy split this year like they usually do. Regardless, technically, all the special runs are possible to get a glossy split, except for probably the dog. Again, they don't usually do variations on the animal models. The mare and foal and show jumper are probably the least likely. From what I just said though, that the glossy ones are probably not going to get a split of matte. I will admit the show jumper probably would be nice and matte though, and they did do a matte and glossy split on this special run mold back in 2011, so that would be kind of a fun callback if they did matte and glossy on it. But again, I don't know if it'd be received well though, so they might not do that. That leaves Get This Party Started, The Ties That Bind Us, YOLO, Hats Off to You, and The Future is Bright, as all to be rather possible for getting a glossy split. I should note that I don't think Breyer has ever given the deco model a glossy split, so again, I think that one's less likely, but it's something I could still see happen. You Only Live Once's color is kind of similar to Wells, who received a matte and glossy split in 2023, so it might be less likely that we see them do that again, at least so soon. On the other hand, maybe they could have just liked this sort of color and gloss so much that they went with it again, but I'm kind of leaning towards the former. I could see Hats Off to You being in gloss, but as I mentioned with the color split, I feel like the special edition of him having two hats makes him feel less likely to get a split variation, which leaves Get This Party Started and Future is Bright. I think they both have a decent chance of being in gloss, but as I just talked about with the pony, I think she is very likely for the color split. And I just, in general, have a stronger feeling that Future is Bright is the one that will get glossed. I think this partly because he is a solid color, and the solid colored special run models are more often glossed than those with patterns, especially when white patterns are really extensive, I think. I just have a fairly good feeling that Future is Bright will get glossed. There is a question, though, of how much the gloss makes his color pop. It's possible it maybe doesn't make it look super amazing, so maybe they don't go with that if it doesn't. But there's also the possibility that they do think it looks great in gloss and end up going with that. It's hard to say. Here is my final guesses for the models that I personally think will get probably 50-50 splits. For hair, I think both YOLO and Let the Good Times Roll will get them. For color, I think it'll be Get This Party Started. And the matte and glossy split, I think, will be Future is Bright. Now to talk about special lower run or micro run variations we might see. So if you remember my video from last year, I really thought that we'd see some crazy variations for the BreyerFest 35th anniversary, and instead we got very minimal, not honestly very exciting variations, which really surprised me because I thought surely, based on the past BreyerFest anniversary years, that was a trend that was going to continue. But for whatever decisions or inner workings going on, they did not do that. It's possible that maybe they wanted to downplay the variations last year so that they could really play up the variations for this year's 75th anniversary of Breyer. It really could go either way on whether or not we see some kind of super special variations thrown in for the special runs this year, but I am going to lean towards that I think we will see something special of some sort happen. It very well could be something like we've seen happen with previous BreyerFests, which I'm going to go into more in depth in a minute. Or it could maybe be something odd that they haven't really done before or hasn't really happened with the special runs. For example, maybe every special run gets a 50-50 split of some sort. Or maybe they don't do variations at all and instead, hey, surprise, all our special runs come with like a halter or a little blanket or something for the 75th anniversary. Who knows what's going to happen, but I am leaning towards the idea that we are going to see something similar occur that happened in past years. So what happened in past years? In case you don't know or don't remember, here is a refresher. BreyerFest 2014 was the 25th anniversary of BreyerFest, and it was actually themed around that anniversary. Every special run ended up getting a very rare 25-piece run of models with white manes and tails and a solid silver body. 2019 was the 30th BreyerFest anniversary. However, unlike 2014, the overall BreyerFest theme was actually Horse Heroes, but they did have some other anniversary theming thrown into the rest of BreyerFest. That year, each special run had a very rare 30-piece variation thrown in, but unlike 2014, the variations were not the same color. Instead, it was a mix of solid colored models that got pearly pinto markings, pattern models that got a coat color variation, and I think their white markings were also made to be pearly. And then the deco and animal models got a blue variation. The other 2 years where the special runs got an explosion of variations were 2021 and 2023, which were not anniversary years. BreyerFest 2021 was the second virtual-only BreyerFest with the theme of Horse of a Different Color. All of the special runs got some kind of variation, with 5 of them getting a fun color decorator variation, of which there are only 200 made of each. 2023 was an interesting year because there was absolutely no indication of a theme or an anniversary that this BreyerFest would get a ton of variations. Almost every special run got a variation of some sort. 4 of them were more typical 50-50 splits, but 3 of them got a rare variation that was 10% of their run size. 2 of those were deco colors, and 1 was actually a realistic color. Since this is such a big anniversary year milestone for Breyer, I think it is possible that we could see a return of how it was in 2014 and 2019, where every special run gets a kind of special anniversary themed variation that kind of all, for the most part, tie into each other or carry similar elements. But since 2021 and 2023 happened more recently, I think they also could make it so every model has a variation, but not every model gets a really rare variation that is anniversary specific. Hopefully that makes sense. In regards to the numbers we might see for the more rare kind of variations that aren't 50-50 splits, I think Breyer is going to lean into the 75th anniversary theming when it comes to the numbers of these potential extra special run variations, whether they are for all special runs or just some of them. We've actually already seen Breyer do a run number related to their anniversary, which is the plush being limited to 1950, which is the year that Breyer started. So I really am kind of expecting that 75 will be related to the variation numbers somehow. If they go with that 75 route, here are 3 different ways I think that could happen with the run numbers. They could do kind of what they did last year, where they had 65-35 split for the 35th anniversary of BreyerFest, but instead they could have it be a 75-25 split, with the 25% being the more rare variations, of course. That would mean that the special runs would have variation sizes between 80 and 100 in quantity, depending on the size of the original run. I don't think this option is as likely, especially because they did it last year, but I could still see it happening. Second possibility is Breyer could do just a straight 75 kind of like micro run for each special run. Pretty straight and simple there. 75 for the 75th anniversary. They are already doing this for the Premier Club Mule, so they may do it again. Or maybe because they are already doing it for the Mule, they're actually going to not do it for BreyerFest and maybe do my third possibility here, which is if they wanted to keep the 75th theming but make the special run variations not quite as rare, then they could go with a run of 750, which is actually not far off from the variation runs of last year, which were about 800 each. Compared to 2021 and 2023, which had about 200 in the special run variations, that I think is a pretty good amount to keep a lot of collectors happy while it still feels like a little bit more rare of a release. Personally, I think that would be the best option to go for because it is something rare but not impossible to get for a lot of collectors that really want it. Alright, I've been talking a lot about the more technical side to special run variations, but let's get into some ideas about what colors we might see. We already got some diamond theming happening for BreyerFest this year and this year for Breyer as a whole, so I think it's possible that we'll see decorators that get a shiny, diamond, sparkly vibe to them. I think we could see something shiny with a hollow effect, kind of like the classic model Radiance. But I'm guessing in solid plastic instead of clear plastic, as cool as that would be. We could see something that's a little bit more like a traditional Breyer decorator color and see something like silver filigree, which still has that diamond vibe to it. In fact, there is a Breyer anniversary saddlebred that has exactly the color that I think we'd see. Breyer could even combine those two ideas and do a model that is silver but has a hollow top coat. I think that would look stunning. If they wanted to do something a little more colorful, they could still do some bright, shiny, sparkly decorators, but maybe do them in a variety of colors to represent gemstone milestones throughout Breyer history. That may be a little bit too niche of an idea, but that would be pretty cool to see an array of colorful models with each color marking some kind of milestone for Breyer. I mean, it's not totally out of the realm of possibility, since for their BreyerFest anniversaries, they did follow the gemstone theme, with 25 being silver and 30th being pearl. Something that goes a different route would be maybe these decorator variations could be not diamond or gemstone themed at all, but instead be themed to Breyer's history in some way. It's maybe possible that we could see them reuse the horse silhouette design that they've clearly been loving to use this year. I don't know how technically difficult something like that would be to apply to a lot of lower run models, so I'm a little more skeptical of that idea, but with how much Breyer likes that idea, who knows, maybe they go for it and add little horse silhouettes to some of the models' designs. Something I could more likely see them do is bring back all 4 classic vintage decorator colors. I don't think they would do this, but what if they did all 4 for the same special runs, so that at least several special runs had like 4 additional micro run variations? That would be probably too crazy for them to do. I don't really see them do that. What I think would be more likely for them to do would be that those colors would be spread out across the special runs. For example, one special run would get a gold charm variation, one would get a Wedgwood variation, and so on. And with that idea, they could also throw in silver and silver filigree too, and actually account for 6 special runs to have a fun, iconic decorator variation. I think that would be really cool. The last idea I have is, again, going along with Breyer history, if they did some models in more realistic colors, but maybe not quite so realistic. If they did some callbacks to some of their old colorways on models, like the old style of Red Roan, for example, and charcoal. In fact, I could see those colors actually just getting thrown in with the other 6 decorator color ideas I have. Alright, I think that accounts for all the ideas I have, but I am curious to know what ideas you have for special run variations, whether that be for the 50-50 split variations of like hair, gloss, or color, or maybe you have some ideas for the fancy variations for the 75th anniversary. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. One last thing before I go, because I'm sure there's going to be some questions about it in the comments. I will give an update about whether or not I'll be at BreyerFest 2025 in person this year. Unfortunately, I still don't have a solid answer yet, but I will admit that it is not looking good. As much as I'd love, of course, to go to BreyerFest this year, there are several things happening that are out of my control that are just not making it look very promising right now. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry this video is very long. If you stuck all the way through, wow, thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. I also hope you all have an awesome day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, everyone!